That morning seemed unremarkable. The cloudy sky hung over Brooklyn with its usual indifference, while the streets bustled with the usual Monday rhythm. Children made their way to Jefferson Elementary School as usual, some dragging their feet, others rushing to make up for lost time. Parents hurriedly said goodbye, believing the day would be like any other. But amidst the routine coming and going, there was a look that carried more than school fatigue. There was alertness, there was fear. Malik Johnson, 12 years old, had heard something, a muffled sound, a scream, coming from where no one ever stopped to listen, from the basement. A forgotten part of the school, locked for years, surrounded by stories that were always dismissed as exaggerations by frightened students. He tried to ignore it. He tried to go about his day as if he hadn't heard anything. But the scream came again, and this time it was impossible to pretend it was his imagination. As teachers hurried through the hallways, oblivious to what was happening beneath their feet, Malik decided to do something no one else did. Speak up. He sought out the school security guard, then a police officer patrolling the area. He pointed. He explained. He asked for help. And for a moment, everyone hesitated. But there was something in that boy's expression that left no room for doubt. What happened next turned the school's routine into a living nightmare. Within minutes, patrol cars surrounded the block. Ambulances were called, and the first orders began echoing over police radios. The adults, finally alert, descended to the basement. And what they found there will never be completely forgotten. But before revealing what was hidden beneath that floor, before revealing the truth that forever altered the history of that community, we need to go back to the source. Because understanding why Malik and what made him act is the only way to understand why some children are not just students. They are witnesses to what the world refuses to see. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. The next graveyard tales are even more disturbing. On that grey morning, as the streets of Brooklyn slowly woke to another ordinary day, a boy walked alone along the narrow sidewalk, balancing his worn backpack on his back and clutching the notebook he always carried as a silent refuge. His name was Malik Johnson, a boy of only 12 who seemed to carry more than just the weight of his school books on his shoulders. His steps were short, his gaze lowered, and his breathing quickened, not out of haste, but out of habit, as if he were accustomed to living in silence, almost invisible to the world around him. Malik was the only child of a single mother who worked 2 jobs, sometimes at a neighborhood diner and sometimes cleaning offices downtown. Her constant absence wasn't a choice, but a necessity, and so he spent most of his time alone, finding companionship in drawings scribbled on the back pages of his notebooks. There, in that small, secret space, Malik built worlds that didn't mock him, worlds where his voice was heard and his presence mattered. At school, the reality was quite different. He always sat at the back of the class, avoiding attention. To his teachers, he was just another quiet student who turned in his assignments on time. To his classmates, he was the strange boy who spoke little, but observed a lot. Some laughed at him, others ignored him, and few cared to know what was hidden behind those watchful eyes. Malik had learned early on that when he tried to express an opinion or share what he saw, no one believed him. His silence was, in fact, a defense. And yet, there was something about Malik that made him unique, his perception. He noticed details that adults overlooked, heard sounds that went unnoticed in the rush of school, noticed looks and gestures that revealed more than words ever could. This sensitivity, which to many seemed merely shyness, would be the key to changing everyone's destiny. On that particular morning, Malik walked through the gate of the Jefferson Elementary School, never imagining that his life would take an irreversible turn. The hallways smelled of chalk and stale coffee. The walls were covered with colorful posters of science fairs and school campaigns, and children laughed loudly as they ran back and forth. For everyone, it was just another day. But for Malik, there was something different in the air, a restlessness he couldn't yet name. As he walked to his classroom, he heard two boys' voices mocking him. "Hey, Malik, did you bring your magic notebook today? Are you going to draw monsters again?" He lowered his head and didn't respond. He was used to this teasing, but what they didn't know was that the notebook wasn't just for drawing. It was also a silent diary where he recorded everything others couldn't see. And it would be precisely this ability to see beyond the obvious that would place him before a mystery no adult dared imagine. Malik didn't know it yet, but his invisible routine was about to be interrupted by something that would change not only his life, but that of the entire city. Because in that school, somewhere below his feet, someone was trying to scream, and only he would have the courage to listen. The morning continued with the same monotony as always. Teachers lecturing, students alternating between whispers and muffled laughter, and Malik in the back of the room, distracted, drawing silently while pretending to follow the explanation. Outside, the light rain beat against the windows, creating a constant sound that filled the gaps of silence in the room. Everything seemed normal until a detail no one noticed changed his breathing in an instant. It was recess. The playground was filled with the noise of children chasing balls, girls trading cards, and teachers inattentively supervising. Malik, as always, chose to stay away. He sat near the side of the building, watching the wet ground reflect the pale colors of the cloudy sky. It was there that he heard the sound for the first time. It wasn't the sound of the ball bouncing on the concrete, nor the laughter echoing from afar. It was something deeper, muffled, coming from below, as if the ground were hiding a muffled voice. He froze for a second, trying to decipher it. The sound repeated, a short, harsh cry, as if someone were gasping for help. Malik looked around, but no one seemed to have noticed. His heart raced. He slowly approached the iron door that led to the basement, always locked and rarely used. He pressed his ear to the cold surface, and the scream came again, clearer, filled with despair. A shiver ran down his spine. For a moment, Malik thought he was imagining things. After all, who would believe him? But the third scream assured him it wasn't a figment of his imagination. Someone was down there, trapped, trying to be heard. He took a few steps back, panting, as the sound of the ball filled the room again, as if nothing had happened. He glanced at his classmates, but no one seemed to notice. The teachers continued their conversations, oblivious to everything. Malik knew that if he spoke, they would laugh at him, as they always did. Still, the feeling that he couldn't ignore it grew within him, as if the responsibility weighed squarely on his fragile shoulders. The boy took a deep breath, adjusted his backpack, and walked back into the classroom, trying to hide his nervousness, but in his mind, a question kept coming. Who was screaming, and why didn't anyone else hear? That afternoon, the rain had already given way to a heavy gray sky, as if the city itself carried within its clouds the omen of something hidden. Malik couldn't shake the screams he'd heard from his mind. Every laugh from his classmates seemed distant. Every word from the teacher mingled with the muffled echo that still pulsed in his memory. While everyone else went about their daily routine, he felt disconnected, as if he were on another plane, trapped behind that iron door that held secrets in the school's basement. As soon as he had a chance, during class change, Malik slipped discreetly into the side hallway. There were fewer children in that forgotten space, and the silence made the atmosphere even more unsettling. His footsteps echoed on the worn tile floor, and his heart raced with each step toward the basement entrance. There it stood, imposing, cold, locked away as always. Malik approached cautiously, pressed his ear to the surface again, and waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened, only a dense silence that seemed to mock his courage. But then a metallic sound echoed from the other side, as if something had been dragged across the floor. His eyes widened. It was at that moment that he noticed something he'd never noticed before. Right near the doorknob, deep marks marred the wood around the doorframe. They were fresh scratches, as if nails or some sharp object had been used to try to escape. Malik ran his fingers along the grooves, feeling the irregularity and weight of the revelation. A chill ran down his spine. On the floor, almost hidden among the dust and small pieces of paper, something caught his eye, a scrap of fabric. He picked it up carefully. It was a torn piece of cloth, dirty, with dark stains that seemed to have been left by something more than dirt. Malik turned it over in his hands, examining every detail, until the dim light coming through the window revealed hues reminiscent of dried blood. Frightened, he put the piece of cloth back in his backpack, not knowing exactly why. His instincts screamed that this piece of evidence might be important, even if he didn't yet understand the magnitude of what was behind it. As he walked back down the hallway, the sounds of recess began again outside, joyful and unconscious. It was as if two realities coexisted in that moment: the innocence of childhood and the horror hidden beneath the school floor. Malik walked between these two worlds, silently carrying the first clue to a mystery that would reveal itself to be far darker than he could have imagined. But no matter how hard he tried to remain calm, one certainty consumed him. If there was physical evidence that someone was there, he needed to tell someone. The problem was, Malik already knew what would happen if he tried to speak. Malik spent the rest of the afternoon restless. The scrap of cloth inside his backpack seemed to burn, like living proof that something terrible was hidden behind that iron door. The words of the screams still echoed in his mind, as if begging him not to be silent, to do something. He knew he couldn't carry that secret alone. As soon as the bell rang, signaling the end of another class, Malik summoned his courage and approached the science teacher, Mrs. Miller, a middle-aged woman known for her authoritative tone and for never showing patience with students who deviated from their normal standards. He took a deep breath, opened his mouth and recounted what he had heard and found. The screams coming from the basement, the scratches on the door, the stained piece of cloth. Her reaction was a mixture of impatience and disdain. She smirked and said, "Malik, you've been watching too many horror movies. It's just your imagination. Now go sit down before I give you a warning." The words were like a punch. His heart sank, but he still held out hope that someone else would believe him. At the next recess, he tried to tell a group of classmates. They listened in silence until one of them, laughing loudly, said, "Look, the weirdo thinks the school is haunted." Laughter rippled through the air, and Malik felt smaller, invisible. But the final blow came when he decided, with all his courage, to go to the school principal, Mr. Whitmore. He entered the office, clutching his backpack tightly, and in a choked voice, repeated the story. The man, too busy reviewing papers, didn't even look up completely. He simply said, "Malik, if you keep making this stuff up, I'm going to have to call your mother. I don't want to hear this nonsense anymore." The rejection hurt more than any mockery. He had done his part, he had spoken, but again his voice carried no weight. He left the office with tears in his eyes, the cloth hidden inside his backpack, and a bitter mixture of frustration and anger. Why didn't anyone believe him? Why didn't anyone want to? Listen. Outside, the laughter of his classmates seemed to further mock his loneliness. Malik walked through the hallways, his heart pounding, until he stopped at the window overlooking the courtyard. Outside, the world remained the same, but inside, something was changing. For the first time, Malik realized that if he wanted to uncover the truth, he would have to act on his own. The adult's silence, his classmates' contempt, and the principal's indifference didn't erase what he'd seen and heard. Quite the contrary, they fueled a dangerous determination within him, because deep down, Malik knew this wasn't a figment of his imagination, and what he was about to do would reveal far more than anyone dared believe. That night, Malik barely slept. The ceiling of the small apartment seemed more distant than ever, and the silence of the room only reinforced the echoes of the screams she had heard in the school basement. She tossed and turned, clutching the notebook she used to record secrets. To her chest, deep in her backpack, the torn piece of cloth seemed to throb, like a dark reminder that this was real, that someone was crying out for help. It wasn't just an impression, it wasn't imagination. He knew he had seen and heard something real. While the city slept, Malik made a decision. If no one believed him, if the adults preferred to mock or silence him, then he would have to seek the truth on his own. This choice, though seemingly simple, was dangerous. For a 12-year-old boy, carrying such a huge secret alone meant defying not only fear, but also the disbelief of an entire world that insisted on ignoring him. The next morning, Malik left home early. He carried his mother's cell phone, which he had hidden in his backpack without her noticing. He knew he needed proof, something that could be shown and undeniable. The walk to school seemed longer than ever, every corner a test of the courage he was trying to maintain. As soon as he arrived, he waited for the right moment. While his classmates ran to the courtyard and the teachers were distracted, Malik walked down the side corridor with quick, silent steps. The iron door was there, the same one that had kept him awake. He took a deep breath, activated the recorder on his cell phone, and placed the device against the cold surface. For a few seconds, nothing happened, only oppressive silence. Then, suddenly, the sound returned. A muffled cry, followed by rhythmic knocking, as if someone were trying to attract attention. Malik held the phone with trembling hands, but he didn't flinch. He recorded every second, every detail of that stifled wail. When the noise stopped, he stopped the recording and played it back. The sound was clear enough to convince anyone willing to listen. For the first time, Malik felt he had something concrete in his hands, proof impossible to ignore. However, he knew that showing it to teachers or classmates wouldn't do any good. He'd tried before. He needed someone who he could actually act. Then he thought of a familiar figure, the police officer, Officer Daniels, who often parked his patrol car near the block to watch the children leave. Daniels was a middle-aged man, respected in the neighborhood, known for his serious but fair demeanor. Malik remembered seeing him talking to his mother a few times and instinctively felt that perhaps he was the only person she could trust. As he left school, Malik gathered his courage. He approached the police car slowly, his backpack clutched tightly to his body. Daniels was shuffling some papers when he heard the boy's low voice. "Sir, I need to show you something." The officer looked up in surprise. Malik handed him his cell phone, and his heart racing asked him to listen to the recording. Daniels, suspicious at first, pressed the play button. As the sound echoed, the crying, the pounding, the cry for help no one wanted to hear, his expression changed. First disbelief, then seriousness. For a moment, Daniels was silent, staring at the boy as if trying to decipher whether this was even possible. Malik, firm despite his fear, said, "I heard it downstairs, in the school basement." The police officer took a deep breath, closed his phone, and looked at the boy intently. Malik felt his stomach churn. For the first time, someone seemed to believe him. But believing was only the beginning. Because when Daniels decided to check the basement with Malik, he had no idea that the secrets hidden there would be much darker than anyone could have imagined. Late afternoon was already darkening the Brooklyn buildings when Officer Daniels walked alongside Malik toward Jefferson Elementary School. The boy seemed too small for the officer's imposing uniform, but his eyes held a determination that belied his age. Daniels, though skeptical, couldn't ignore what he'd heard on his cell phone. Those sounds weren't simple interference or pranks. There was pain and desperation in that recording, something he, with years of experience, recognized immediately. They entered through the side gate, the same one the employees usually passed through. The building was already empty, silent, and this silence had a strange, almost suffocating weight. Malik led the way, his hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway until he stopped before the iron door. There, before that barrier, the boy pointed firmly. "It's here." Daniels examined the door. He noticed the deep marks around the frame, scratches that couldn't be explained by natural wear and tear. He knelt, ran his hand along the grooves, and felt the chill Malik already knew well. It was a sign of struggle, of an attempted escape. There was no denying it. Using the police car's flashlight, he illuminated the space better and soon found what appeared to be a crack between the wall and a stack of old boxes. He pushed hard and revealed an even narrower space, as if someone had tried to hide the makeshift entrance. Malik, his heart racing, leaned closer and whispered, "I told you there was something." Daniels didn't answer. He removed his gun from its holster, made room, and pushed the door open until a metallic creak echoed through the hallway. The air that escaped was heavy, heavy with damp, and something darker, a sour smell that betrayed abandonment. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, gradually revealing what was hidden. Chains attached to the walls, a broken chair lying in the corner, and torn papers scattered across the floor. Malik covered his mouth with his hands, trying to contain his shock. These weren't just marks of old use, they were recent, so recent that there were still plastic bottles on the floor and hardened food remnants on a plate. Daniels felt his stomach churn. This wasn't a storage room, it wasn't a forgotten place, it was a prison. As he explored the room, something caught his attention even more. On one of the walls, a newspaper clipping was taped to the wall. The faded letters spoke of a teenage girl who had disappeared 2 years earlier, whose case had never been solved. Malik felt his legs tremble. This wasn't just proof, it was confirmation that his intuition had been right all along. Daniels recorded every detail on his cell phone, knowing he would need to present concrete evidence to justify a formal investigation. Malik watched silently, but his heart was in conflict. Part of him felt relief that he was finally being heard, that someone had seen what he had seen. But the other part was overcome with fear, because now there was no doubt. There was someone behind it all, someone using the school itself as a hiding place. Suddenly, a crack sounded in the hallway above them. Daniel shone his flashlight at the door, his body rigid, as Malik took a few steps back. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed, getting closer and closer, as if someone had discovered the secret was about to be revealed. And in that instant, Malik realized, finding the evidence was just the beginning. The real danger was yet to come. The footsteps in the hallway echoed like hammering in Malik's chest. Each sound seemed closer, heavier, as if announcing a presence that didn't want to be discovered. Officer Daniels kept his gun steady, his eyes fixed on the entrance, while the flashlight drew restless shadows on the low basement ceiling. The boy, huddled behind some boxes, barely breathed, fearing that even the slightest noise would give away his position. It was then that the figure appeared. The school janitor, Mr. Harris, appeared in the doorway, holding a bunch of keys that jingled in a strangely menacing way. His face was partially illuminated by the light coming from the hallway, and there was something in his gaze that immediately made Malik shiver. It wasn't surprise, nor was it simple irritation. It was anger, mixed with barely concealed fear. "What are you doing here?" Harris's voice was firm, but there was a tension that betrayed more than mere authority. Daniels didn't lower his gun. Why was this door locked and hidden? What is this place? The janitor stepped forward, the keys dangling in his hand like a makeshift weapon. This space isn't safe. You shouldn't be here. You don't know what you're messing with. Malik felt his throat dry. The words sounded like a veiled threat, an attempt to prevent the truth from coming out. He could tell Harris wasn't just surprised by the intrusion, he was desperate to keep anything from coming out. Daniels took a step forward, commanding the authority of his uniform. Then explain, now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Harris looked away for a moment, and it was in that brief moment that Malik understood. The janitor knew exactly what was there. His rigid posture, the sweat dripping down his forehead, and the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands left no doubt. "Get out of here," Harris said, his tone sounding more like a desperate order. "You have no idea what you're risking." Daniels was ready to confront him, but Malik couldn't help but feel that behind that veneer of authority there was much more to be uncovered. Something in the janitor's gaze told him this wouldn't be the last time they'd cross paths. The seconds seemed to drag by. The tension grew, as if the basement air had become thicker, suffocating. Malik knew that from that moment on, it wasn't just about proving something was wrong. Now it was a fight for survival. And when Daniels finally gave the order for Harris to retreat, Malik realized the secret game was just beginning. Because, staring into that furious gaze, he realized the true enemy might be much closer than he'd ever imagined. Night fell heavily over Brooklyn, but Jefferson Elementary remained lit up like never before. Police cars lined the entire block, sirens blared incessantly, and radios broadcast rapid-fire orders as officers fanned out through the hallways. Daniels's warning had mobilized immediate reinforcements, and now there was no denying it. The basement held secrets that needed to be revealed in full view of everyone. Malik, leaning against a wall, silently watched the intense movement. With each firm step of the police officers, he felt his breath catch. What had previously seemed like just a private nightmare was now too big, too real, and encompassed the entire city. The iron door, previously ignored, was smashed open with the crack of a battering ram, and the metallic echo sounded like the end of a cycle of silence. An officer's flashlight illuminated the shadowy space. What was revealed chilled the air. Inside the basement, chains hung from the walls, dirty mattresses were piled haphazardly, and boxes filled with children's belongings, shoes, small clothes, notebooks with handwritten names. The smell was suffocating, a mixture of mold and something more cruel, as if each object carried the memory of those who had suffered there. Police officers photographed, filmed, and catalogued every detail. Daniels, his expression hard, ordered that nothing be touched until forensics arrived. Malik, for his part, felt his eyes well up when he found a small diary open on a box. The pages were stained, but a few sentences were still legible. "If anyone finds this, please don't leave me here." Outside, the news was already spreading. Journalists crowded in front of the school, pushing microphones, jostling for space to get exclusive footage. Cameras broadcast live, and within minutes the entire town watched in shock as it was revealed that inside a building where children learned to read and write, there was a space used to imprison them. Social media exploded. Outraged messages circulated. Parents rushed to schools for news, and rumors of missing children were once again being discussed with fury. What had previously been cold cases, treated as isolated accidents, now had a direct connection. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place before the public's eyes. In the midst of that crowd, Malik remained invisible as always. No one knew that it was he who had taken the first step, that it was his quiet courage that brought to light what the adults refused to see. Only Daniels knew, and in a brief moment of calm, he placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and said softly, "You made a difference that no one had the courage to make." But the tension wasn't over yet. As the officers dismantled the place, one of the sniffer dogs stopped in front of a side wall and began barking incessantly. The sound echoed through the basement, drawing everyone's attention. Daniels approached and ordered them to investigate. Minutes later, they discovered an even narrower passage, hidden behind loose bricks. The already suffocating atmosphere became unbearable. Malik's eyes widened. If the first space was already terrifying, what else could be hidden beyond that wall? The crowd outside was screaming for justice, but inside, the air was heavier than ever. Daniels took a deep breath and ordered the new entrance opened, and it was in that instant that Malik realized what they had uncovered so far was only the surface. The true horror was still hidden, waiting to be revealed to the world. The wall slowly crumbled, brick by brick, revealing a narrow opening that seemed to lead to a forgotten tunnel. The air escaping from it was even heavier, laden with humidity and something everyone avoided naming. Malik, leaning against a corner, watched silently as the officers, flashlights in hand and guns ready, cautiously advanced inside. The sound of radios filled the air, mixed with the barking of sniffer dogs, which continually signaled that something alive was ahead. Daniels was the first to enter, ducking through the closed entrance. Malik shouldn't have been there, but he couldn't look away, as if every movement were part of a dark film he couldn't escape. He knew it was somehow connected to the scream he'd heard days before, and he dreaded what they would find. The tunnel led to an even larger space, a sort of makeshift underground room. The flashlights illuminated the impossible, scattered mattresses, overturned chairs, and at the end, a compartment locked with chains. The sound that came from there made everyone hold their breath. It was a low, fragile, but vivid cry. Daniels ran, broke the padlock with the help of another officer, and opened the rusty door. Inside, huddled against the wall, was a girl of about 15, her face pale and her eyes wide in the darkness. She could barely speak, only sobbing in disjointed words. One of the officers took off his coat and wrapped her in a blanket, while another radioed for immediate help. Malik felt his legs tremble. It was real. Someone was trapped there, someone who would have remained forgotten if he hadn't had the courage to speak up. The noise intensified. More police officers entered, journalists tried to breach the barrier outside, and helicopters began to circle overhead, illuminating the night with beams of white light. Ambulances positioned themselves near the entrance, ready to take the teenager to the hospital. The organized chaos had a single purpose now: to save lives. Malik watched everything with a mixture of fear and relief. He wasn't seeking recognition, but the feeling of seeing that girl being pulled out alive brought him a new weight, the certainty that even invisible to everyone, his voice had power. Daniels looked at him silently, and in that gaze there was gratitude, but also the knowledge that the fight was far from over. As the crowd outside cheered, as the teenager was loaded into the ambulance, forensic experts continued to explore the basement and tunnel. Cameras captured every detail, broadcasting live to the entire city. The school's name, once associated with the innocence of childhood, was now headline news as the scene of an unimaginable nightmare. But even amid the commotion and relief at the rescue, something lingered. Malik sensed there were more layers to the mystery, as if each discovery opened the door to an even bigger question. The captivity had been revealed, a life had been saved. But what about the other evidence? What about the marks, the newspaper clippings, the clothes that didn't belong to that teenager? The answer wouldn't come immediately. The scream that had started it all had been heard, but now the town had to face a new truth. If one victim had been rescued, how many other stories were still buried in silence? By the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew the story. Newspapers were splashing headlines about the rescue at Jefferson Elementary School. Newscasts broadcast footage of the operation, and social media was buzzing with anger. Parents wept in outrage, authorities promised thorough investigations, and the community demanded answers. Amid all this commotion, there was one name that had yet to be publicly mentioned: Malik Johnson. The school, previously plunged into the silence of routine, was now surrounded by journalists and cameras. Teachers, principals, and even neighbors gave quick interviews, trying to explain the inexplicable. It was into this scene that Malik arrived, walking with his head down, accompanied by his mother, who had only just realized the full extent of what her son had endured alone. His classmates, who had previously laughed at him, now looked at him with astonishment, some with shame. Professor Miller, the same one who had scorned his words, approached him with teary eyes and tried to justify herself. "Malik, I didn't know. I couldn't imagine." But he just lowered his eyes, not responding. There was no anger in his expression, just a deep silence, as if words were no longer necessary. The weight of what had happened could not be erased with apologies. At the impromptu assembly in the gymnasium, Principal Whitmore took the floor before the assembled community. His voice choked. He declared, "Last night, we uncovered horrors that should never have existed in a school, and we must acknowledge that it was thanks to the courage of one student that the truth came to light. Malik Johnson, you are this city's true hero." The name echoed through the space, and everyone turned their gaze to the thin boy who stood silently beside his mother. Applause erupted, tears streamed down faces that had previously ignored him, and Malik, shy, simply took a deep breath. He didn't want the spotlight. He wasn't seeking medals. He just wished that a day. Earlier, someone had heard his voice. Daniels, present at the meeting, crossed his arms and regarded the boy with respect. He knew that this courage was not born from a need for recognition, but from an inability to ignore the pain of others. This was Malik's true greatness. The ceremony was over, but the boy's life would never be the same again. On the way home, sitting in the back seat of the car with his mother, Malik stared out the window, observing the streets lined with posters and lit candles in front of the school, improvised tributes made by the community. The world finally saw him. But inside, the feeling was different, because even with the applause, a question still echoed in his mind. What if the screams he heard were just the beginning? That night, when he finally returned home, Malik sat silently before the window of his small room. The distant city lights twinkled like artificial stars, but to him, nothing seemed bright. The weight of the past few days was still there, pressing down on his chest as if every breath were an effort. His mother prepared dinner in the kitchen, casting worried glances, but respecting her son's silence. She knew that some experiences don't easily dissolve into words. The boy held the old notebook that had always been with him. Among the drawings and notes were recent, hastily scribbled, almost illegible. They were attempts to record what he had heard, what he had seen, as if he feared his memory might fail him. As he turned the pages, Malik stopped on a sentence he had written days before. "Nobody listens to me." He smiled sadly, because now everyone was listening to him, but only after the pain had already been revealed. Outside, the wind shook the trees, and the sounds of the neighborhood mingled with the distant drone of helicopters still circling the neighborhood. The entire city was on alert, and Malik understood that this wouldn't end with a simple rescue. The truth revealed in the school basement was only part of something larger, and signs that much more lay hidden still remained. The next morning, Malik returned to school. He walked slowly, observing the police tape, the protest signs, and the flowers left by residents. The building, once unremarkable, was now a symbol of open wounds. As he passed through the gate, he glanced at the iron basement door, now guarded by police. A chill ran down his spine, but his eyes didn't waver. He knew he would never forget that sound, the scream that only he had, the courage to hear. Inside the school bus, routine seemed to want to return. Children laughed, whispered, and talked about cartoons, as if trying to dispel the shadow that hung over everyone. Malik sat near the window, leaned his head against the glass, and let his gaze wander the streets. Everything seemed the same, but nothing really was. It was then, amid the familiar roar of the engine and the conversations, that Malik frowned. He'd heard something. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was enough to make him hold his breath. A distant, whisper-like sound coming from outside, carried by the wind. He sat up straighter, attentive, while his colleagues followed, oblivious. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it, but the goosebumps on his skin told him otherwise. The imaginary camera closes in on his serious face, reflected in the window. The narrator whispers, "He was just a boy." But he heard what no one wanted to hear, and that changed the fate of an entire city. What if that had just been the beginning? If this story has captivated you thus far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow future stories. Like and share this video. Your participation is what motivates us to continue bringing you stories that move, intrigue, and make you reflect. Don't miss the next chapter.